Hi everyone, welcome. I'm Linda Rossetti and I'm thrilled that you're here for week number 6 of Your Move, making the most of your next transition. This week our topic is exploring forward, which may seem like a funny combination of words, but I really do mean exploring what might be next, right? Very often we all come to transition with this notion of what it needs to be about, right? It needs to be about a spouse, or a desire to start a new relationship, or a new type of career, or a move, or a different way to be with a family member or a friend, right? All sorts of things bring us to transition. But as we go through the work of transitioning, it becomes apparent that there may be other things at play. And so what I mean by this week's objective, exploring forward, is really opening ourselves up to what exactly is going to be the success for you as you continue to move forward. And so we're going to look at transition as perhaps maybe not the one singular thing we thought was the outcome we were seeking, and open the aperture on what it is that's going to engage kind of the fullness of who we are as we walk forward. And so we have 2 different types of activities we're going to do this week, right? One is going to be to play more with what that future needs to be, but we're also going to recognize the things that block us from that and begin to really think about what's holding us either from seeing that or from participating in it. Let me take a minute and just explain or review kind of where we've been, right? We've learned that transition is a process, right? And the process requires us to do several steps in order to really move forward, right? The first step is to envision what that future is that will engage our hearts. And that future can be any one of a number of things. And by the way, it's not really easy to do that step, right? A lot of people come to transition and say, oh, I can't see it. Others say, oh my goodness, that's so grandiose, I'll never be able to do that, and everything in between, right? So envisioning is not an insignificant step. So the first step in the process is envisioning. The second is validating that vision, right? Very often we can come up with something. I've worked with people who've said, oh my gosh, I haven't thought about that since some long time ago. And we need to validate that because we don't want to introduce unnecessary risk, right? We don't want to just, head off into the sunset in a new direction, right? We want to validate those things that we envision so that, in fact, we can lower any one risk that is related to one step, right? We want to make sure that we're moving forward in a way that's mindful and appropriate and not reckless in any way. And then from those steps we learn. We put a learning loop in it and we begin to envision again and again. And so that's important because through it all, choice is with us. And we took a moment to think about our behavior patterns with respect to choices. And we're going to continue to revisit that work because our choices and how we approach decisioning, particularly in our personal lives, is going to become very, very important as we think about envisioning the future and releasing those things that might keep us away from some of those things that are very important to us. We also took a moment to think about why we're here, right? Those triggers and other things that kind of brought us to this moment. And ultimately, we took a moment to define dreams, right? I think I referenced the work of Daniel Levinson, whose work I really love. He's now deceased, but worked very actively in the 70s and 80s about dreaming. And he said of dreams, he said, if we lack dreams, then our life lacks purpose and vitality. And I find that so interesting, right? That we can do all sorts of things, but it ultimately is the resonance or the alignment of our dreams that helps kind of knit it all together. And so the exercise last week was asking you to think about purpose and impact, right? What are those things that kind of engage you, right? Who you are at your core, the vitality and goodness that you have to bring. And it's as unique as our fingerprint, right? Every answer is different because each of us are different. But nonetheless, there is something that engages kind of our vitality and our purpose. And that's the thing we're going for here. So let me focus a little bit more on this week. As I mentioned at the start of the video, there are 2 activities we're going to focus on. The first is we're going to revisit envisioning, right? This will be the 3rd week we do this. And I know many of you said, oh, the first week, the open door, it was really hard. I had nothing to say. And that's okay. Recognizing that is as important as putting something down on the page. Last week, we used the purpose and impact exercise to see if we could get at some more of what envisioning the future might mean, right? What it needs to contain. And this week, our work, again on envisioning, is going to use an entirely different tact, right? And this tact is almost like what I hear from my 14-year-old son's English teacher. She tells me, we have to trick them. We have to trick them into writing. And this exercise is going to trick us into stumbling on those things that might be important to us. And the exercise is a scenario exercise, and it asks us to write stories, right? It's kind of a creative writing activity. It's just write a story. And it asks us to use the intention work that we've done, either in week 5 or earlier, as the basis. And if you can read that intention and come up with, an idea about your future, write a story about it. And you'll see I offered you an example from my work in the exercise. So hopefully that will get you started. But the whole idea about the scenario games is really to help you come at this notion of envisioning from an entirely different way, right? We tried to draw pictures about it. We tried to write about it in purpose and impact. This time we're going to try to kind of use creative journaling to see if we can't stumble onto those things that might resonate with you. The second set of exercises that we're doing this week is really recognizing the barriers that may be in the way for us. And barriers can take many forms. And they really are those things that impede our progress in a desired direction, right? That's the definition I use for barriers, right? Barriers are those things that impede our progress in a desired direction. And we're going to not, some people think of barriers like game on, I have a barrier and I'm going to go over it. I'm going to work my tail off to go over it. Other people meet a barrier and completely kind of stall, right? We're not going to work to like smush the barrier or, divert the barrier. We are just going to first recognize the barrier, right? Let's see if we can't inventory the barriers that are present for us. And they can be tangible things like, I got the mortgage payment, I have to make the donuts. And they can be intangible things like, try as I might, in my head, this is me, it's my parents telling me, don't step out of the lines, don't do that, right? That's mine. But everyone has all these things. And I think the first goal in barrier work is to just simply recognize them. No judgment, recognize them. And the end part of that exercise asks us to see if we can't bring our awareness to how those barriers influence us, right? And that's important work, right? Influence doesn't mean that it stops us or accelerates us or does anything. It's just recognizing how the presence of that barrier influences us in the moment, right? I shared a moment ago that, I grew up in a household where, virtually everything I did was out of bounds. Oh, you can't do that. No, don't make waves. And so it's amazing how present that is when I come up with an idea or a thought. It's like, oh no, you could never do that, right? So recognizing the influence is the first step in our ability to kind of move forward with some ideas or things that might be very necessary for us to tap into that vitality and purpose that is so much a part of who we are. So this week, week number 6, our objective is exploring forward. We'll do 2 things. We'll work on one set of exercises that help us get at this notion of envisioning our future from a different way. The second thing that we'll do is we'll work on barriers, right? We'll recognize them. We'll try to make a laundry list of all the barriers that might be present. And instead of judging them or characterizing them, we're just going to sit there and recognize how they might influence us. And from that, we'll be really ready to kind of look at a data set that we've created over the last 6 weeks and use it in weeks 7 and 8 to really vector in on some choices that we all have to make as we go forward. So I'm excited for this week. The 2 exercises may take you a bit more time than the earlier exercises. If that's the case, I am sorry. Please make whatever choices you have to in terms of staging the work. And as always, if you run into something or have a question, don't hesitate to outreach to me. Join us if you can on Thursday's call. I've canceled the Sunday's call because it just didn't seem to work for so many people. If there's another time that people would like to try, let me know and I'm happy to give it a go. Anyway, have a wonderful week and I look forward to hearing how it goes.